going to have a little fun. We're going to be talking about brands, and what we're going to try to do is to have a conversation among a panel of gurus, experts, people who have a lot of knowledge about building brands, particularly in this high-tech, highly changeable manner. Ooh, somebody give me some sound effects. Oh, yeah? Okay. So let's turn to our experts, and if you guys would, just take a second and introduce yourself. Rob?
My name is Rob Candelino. I am the Vice President of Brand Building at Unilever. I look after our skin business. And if I do this throughout the session, it's because I just got my fuel band, and I love it, and I'm dramatically behind my targets today.
I have to say, I feel like I'm in the middle of a road with two cars coming right at me. So,
it's deer in the headlights.
Yeah, I'm a deer in the headlights. Well, hopefully I'm not a deer in the headlights. I'm Steve Farella. I wear two hats. My first hat, or one of my hats, is CEO and founder of, or co-founder of Targetcast TCM, which is now an MDC Partners company. So my other hat is the CEO of Maxcom Global Media, which is the media holding group for MDC Partners, and we're in the process of building that.
Rob, I thought you were shaking the last little bit of shower gel out of, that's what that was.
Yeah, that's why
I'm Jennifer Kasper from Macy's. I've been part of the Macy's organization for about 12 years, and in the last 18 months have taken responsibility for our digital media strategy as well as our multicultural marketing, which at the time they were grouped together didn't make an enormous amount of sense. They were two small pieces of the business about 5-6 years ago, and more recently they have started to really inform each other in interesting ways.
Brent?
And I'm Brent Poer. I'm the president of LiquidThread, which is the content division within SMG. So we do all of the branded content across all of our clients like P&G, Microsoft, Coke, things like that.
And allows you to wear no socks today.
No socks at all, ever. That's part of my brand.
Gotcha, that's your brand.
I like the pants.
That's it. Okay, let's kick this off. Do brands matter anymore? Anybody?
Listen, honestly, I think people are brands. Every single individual from the age of 2 starting to be verbal and think about how they're representing themselves, up to my 96-year-old grandmother who jokes around about kind of who she is and what defines her. I think, the 21st century is an era of individuals being brand builders and all the platforms that have emerged that support that. And so for us as brand managers, brand leaders within the corporate environment, I think it's about figuring out how to channel the enthusiasm of individuals.
Yeah, Steve?
I think, yes, of course. But I'll also add to that and say brands matter more now than ever before.
Why?
Well, because a brand, essentially, if you boil it down, right, if somebody said, give me one word, I'm going to give you 2 words. A brand is a promise, okay? When you buy a BMW, you're buying the ultimate driving machine. They spent a lot of time trying to figure out what exactly that is in the makeup of a car, in the messaging, and for some of us on the media side, where we place that messaging. Today's environment is not only difficult economically, it's also cluttered. Every single market is mature in this market, right? So clearly, having your product, your brand, now stand for something is a quick way to telegraph what you're going to get when you buy that car, when you go to that bank, when you buy that analgesic. So brands today, I think, matter more now than ever before.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting you use the word promise because as we described the legacy of the Dove brand in this country, it was founded on the back of a promise to women that we wouldn't dry their skin like soap did in 1957, and we never broke that promise. And so it was a commitment that we would deliver superior care then, and 55 years later, that's the standard we hold ourselves to. Along that journey, our consumers, our women wanted more. So what defines us? What's the differentiating aspect beyond your functional proposition? And what we've learned is the social mission of the brand to inspire all women to see beauty as a source of confidence, not anxiety, and to help all girls grow to realize their full potential is the defining aspect beyond our functional promise of the product. So I couldn't agree more. And as social media has enabled, as the digital age, as the internet has become the great democratizer and allowed for all people to weigh in on brands and convey their opinions on them, I actually agree with you. It is much more important now to stand for something, and that historically has always been the defining characteristic of what separates a brand and a product.
But isn't that fleeting? I mean, is
No,
there any
it's increasing.
stickiness to this? I mean, you may buy that BMW today, but what's going to say that you're going to come back tomorrow with this high-speed, high-tech marketing we've got today?
Consistency of promise. If you are principled in your approach, you believe you have a functional and, in our case, superior point of difference, and you are unflinching in delivering that both in your messaging, your equity, your tone, how you deliver it, what screens, the messaging, and the product delivery, you're gonna.
Brent said, Jim, so
No, I
he's-
mean, my whole thing is, I come from the entertainment side of this and from a television background. And we spent so many years kind of diluting the brands that we were working on, and they really don't mean anything to consumers the way that they did when we were growing up. You knew what NBC stood for, you knew what CBS stood for, you knew what ABC was. And it was really a shift on how we changed marketing. We were talking about shows and day, date, and time to get people there to the television screen. But it's a very different mix now based on technology, because even on an app structure, you have to be able to, first of all, adopt the brand into your overall piece of technology. But then it has to mean something. You have to know what's in it. And you want that icon to start meaning something again. So I think this is almost going backwards for at least part of our business to sit there and say, that brand has to mean something. So while they haven't spent a lot of time using their own on-air to sell what the promise of that brand is, they've got to start making that be a value, because there are different points of intersection that you're going to tap into a brand and you're going to participate or consume a piece of content.
And I think that's part of the clarity amongst all the clutter that historic brands, loved brands, more established brands have as an advantage, because not only is there built-in recognition, but if you really do protect it in a way and develop it in a way that is still contemporary and relevant, but also it ends up being a reflection on identity. So what it means for someone to put Dove in her basket versus an alternative, or to shop at Macy's, or to consume some of the content that you're working on for your partners. There's almost a badging aspect, whether it's formal or whether it's more psychological. I think picking brands obviously speaks to identity.
Do we have that stickiness? Go ahead. Do we have that?
I wanted to add one more thing, by the way, because you got into something here, and so I wanted to add an adjective: honest branding. Okay, you really have to brand your, and I keep getting back to product, right? At the end of the day, it's a bar of soap, right? But it's a
Beauty
brand. Mm-hmm. With honest branding, you can then deliver on it, right?
Right.
And then you get that full circle going. Boy, I expected that. I got it. I want more. Your question was, how do we get them to come back? Yeah. If you don't have honest branding, but you have kind of aspirational branding, I'd really like to stand for this, but you're not, right? Someone's going to buy it. They're going to get it. It ain't going to work, right? It could be an emotional work, right? Cars still drive, but it won't feel like the ultimate driving machine. And then you won't get them back. So honest branding, I mean, boy, that takes smarts. That really takes something else that we need to get into, which is really understanding the consumer in what I keep getting back to, a very mature environment. Cluttered, mature, and difficult environment. So.
But in this competitive environment where technology has given us temporary competitive advantages that are shrinking, because the ability to replicate products and product quality across multiple brands within a particular category is becoming less and less. So is it not easier to be able to tripwire a consumer to go from one brand to another in that same category? Does the branding that we do today in the high-tech world have that long-term stickiness? Rob, what do you think?
It is certainly a provocative question. I like to look at it as a challenge. The great brands must rise. Right? I think it makes us all better. If 30 years ago, someone used a shower gel or a shampoo from Unilever and didn't like it, they might send a letter, and we might get 10 letters. We know today, in a nanosecond, if a fragrance change or a chassis change on a formula that we've made does not work, we will know today, and we must act on it tomorrow, or consumers will vote with their wallets. And I think that makes us better. So I'm not sounding the death knell on great brands. I actually think great brands will become exceptionally better, because there is no excuse now to not have that two-way, dynamic, frequent, engaged, relevant conversation with your constituency. And if you don't have that, you're misguided and you're delusional, because the consumers of today want to be involved in that decision-making process.
So who's doing great branding that has durability, long-term nature to it, that has that level of long-term stickiness? Any clear examples come to mind?
Well, you go first. No, go ahead. We're going to be tempted to pick our
We're going to get a lean in over here on Macy's. No, I mean, look, I think I've had the pleasure of working on a lot of the P&G beauty brands. I think CoverGirl is one of those brands that you know immediately what CoverGirl stands for. Mm-hmm. I think there's a promise to the consumer in the idea of transformation, but it's also aspirational and attainable. It's not something that's too far out of their reach, and I don't think that as a brand, they've tried to take that in any other direction. When you work on P&G overall, you understand how much data they have. You understand how much they read into their consumer groups and how they look at what products are selling and why. It's an amazing, business to work alongside and partner with them on. And when you can actually start watching your work lead to sales is something that is really it's pretty amazing. I did all the top model work at the very beginning, and you could literally see if something was on air that weekend, it would sell out in Walmart over the weekend. And that's when you sit there and go, wow, we are changing kind of this marketing model and the communication model. And the consumers were leaning in a way that was, drove them to retail. So I thought it's kind of an amazing brand to work on.
I'm a huge admirer, particularly lately, of what Nike's doing in having gone from a late 20th century model focused on celebrity athletes and building the brand around, Michael Jordan and all these almost unattainable skill sets. Now having really pushed it into the space of everyone being an athlete and creating products and platforms that are built around an individual athlete, and then how celebrities are still part of that, but as they are athletes as opposed to stars. And I think there's something very personal about what they've been doing both in their advertising messaging and also in their use of social media that feels really individual.
So that provides a level of differentiation that very few other brands can really aspire to, because you've provided that celebrity point of difference that is associated with the brand. What do we suggest that brand marketers and agencies do to kind of create that level of differentiation? Because that's what really is going to distinguish brands year after year after year. I mean, you must face this every day, Rob, in terms of the challenge.
Yeah, I think for us, it's given the nature of the category we're in, it starts with the product.
Right.
The British expression, it does what it says on the tin, right? If we do not deliver superior care, if we do not deliver fantastic fragrances that make you more attractive to the opposite sex by using Axe, then we've failed on the functional proposition, which is still in our categories the primary reason to buy. Beyond that, the differentiation, as I said, is more the equity-related stuff, the tone and the manner and the delivery mechanism that we use to convey it to consumers. But for us, it starts with the product, and that's why I come back to if your product is superior in nature, that gives you license to have the conversations in whatever fashion you want with your consumer group. But you must deliver on their core need first.
Steve, how about some examples on great web branding, great points of marketing?
Well, I was going to talk about one of our, we've got many clients that have great examples of pure branding and great branding. Maybe I'll mix both of these stories that I was going to tell you. So here's a great branding story that none of you know, because I'm doing my job well. So one of our clients is TIAA-CREF. Since nobody here works for a college or institution, I don't know that any, but there you go. So you two should know. When you come into a school, they ask you, well, who would you like to manage your retirement program? So the creative agency, right, together with the client and with our assistants, created TIAA-CREF or branded TIAA-CREF for the greater good. Because what we knew is that when people come to work at a college or another university, they're really not there to make a lot of money. They're there because they believe they're helping out and training 2,000 philosophers, just what we need, right? But they're working for the greater good. That was a fabulous position for that brand, TIAA-CREF. And what I like about what we do is we help with that positioning, and then we take it as a lead. And today, better than Jeff Grant, better than 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, where our instruments were blunt, our instruments are very, very sharp these days. So wherever we were in big, we'll call it big box television, right? Small television, digital video, search, place-based, all kinds of things, had to reinforce the fact that we were about the greater good. So, football, forget it. Olympics, yes. Okay? Education programming, travel programming, Epicurean programming, things that were meaningful to this target really came out. Where was the competition? Football, baseball, basketball. Greater good? Not really. They're doing it for the money. So the media side, in my humble opinion, takes that positioning that's been crafted by the creative agency and then runs with it and puts it all over there. And then guys like you, I even take a 30-second or 15-second idea and blow it out to an hour.
It allows you to tell a longer. We are actually allowed to tell longer stories, and I think it's something that starts to dimensionalize the brand in a different way. I think with our clients, it's been hard to get to the place where it always has to be positive, because you can also reinforce a brand through something that's negative that happens. You can sit and say this is on brand or this is off brand based on the behavior. And so I think that's been part of our evolution overall, is to sit there and say it's okay. It's okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be exactly on brand, because you can reinforce it in a different way, and that can also enhance the story overall and dimensionalize it in a whole different way.
We've been talking more and more about two-way conversations with consumers, to the point where we read often that the brand is owned by the consumers as opposed to the company themselves. What do you think about that? Is that fair? Rob?
Again, yeah, I mean, I've worked on Dove in this country now, this tour, 2.5 years. Does that, just because of the position I hold, does that give me more entitlement to the course of the Dove brand versus that woman who's been using it for 35 years in Nebraska, since her dermatologist told her she needs it? And if I change the fragrance or change the formula or even change the packaging and she doesn't like it, is it her call or my call? It's clearly her call. It's clearly, the 40% of U.S. households who have the product in the home. If I don't listen to them, if they're not my boss, then I'm inevitably going to make a mistake. And the mistake is I don't make a positive difference in their life. Starts in their shower, how it affects their skin, how it affects their self-esteem, and the rest of their day. So without question, when you're in the product business, you're there at the behest and at the service of your consumers. And if you let them down on product efficacy, you've let them down on the core promise of your brand. And so if you don't listen to them, then you're not doing your job.
Gotcha. Jen?
So it's interesting because I think there was a previous answer that you gave, Rob, that said the product for you is at the center. For us, the customer is at the center. And yet I'm listening to you describe this situation that is so true about the balance that you're trying to strike between the product and the consumer of that product. And I think that's the fine line. It's perhaps the fine line between the individual as a brand builder and the brand as making a promise to that individual, and where that, straddling that line of who owns it. I think that guiding it, shepherding it, guaranteeing that it doesn't go off the rails, that's the responsibility of the marketer and of the enterprise. The customer is there whispering clues, shouting clues, letting you know when you're headed in a direction they're not comfortable with. But I also think none of us would move forward if we had only ever listened to the customer and what the customer was saying she wanted at a moment in time. I think for every great brand, there's a moment where the leaders of that brand are leaping forward, making a judgment about where the brand needs to head in order to be relevant. We're all planning how many months out, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18. To be able to know where our brand needs to head relative to our competitive landscape, relative to the business that we need to drive. I think that's where it takes some vision and responsibility from within.
How do you do that? That's tough.
Yeah,
Magic 8 Ball.
I like that.
Lots of consumer studies. I mean, we at Lifetime, when I was at Lifetime Television, we used to always say that let the viewer be your guide. She'll get you there. She'll tell you what she likes. She'll tell you where she believed the brand needed to be. And when we had our greatest successes, and I was there a long time ago when Carol Black was there, we became number one because we were slow and steady. We listened to what she wanted. We were able to program that way. When we went off course, it's because we started not making programming decisions that were relevant to her. And you could actually just watch your numbers on a daily basis. And there's nothing worse than a minute by minute on a television show when you just watch it go from, they had a great lead in, and then it's going down into the toilet afterwards. And you're just watching it going, oh my God, they hate this. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to get it on air. Yeah. But, you know, your consumer, your viewer, your customer, they will tell you whether you're on or not. But you also have to, you know, parse out some of the kind of strong-willed people who are, you know, trying to step in line in front of the other people and have a bigger voice and sit there and say, does this really count or not? You have to be a little intuitive.
Steve.
I think brands have always been shared. Okay, so it's not just a manufacturer.
This isn't new?
This is not new. The difference, though, is that we've just begun to hear. Okay, so, right? So before the internet, right? Before we had the path back, we'd put a product out, and I'm going to get to television because television is a great example. Okay, but we'd put a product out. I mean, marketers would go out to the market and find out what people liked. Right, and we'd come back, and either it would fail, it would succeed, or it'd be someplace in the middle, and we'd have to resuscitate it. But now, with the path back, let's get to television as an example of a brand, right? So AMC is a client. They've got many brands. AMC is a brand, but Walking Dead, The Killing, right? Mad Men, all brands. You want to know how well those shows are doing? You want to know what people think of characters, about the storyline, about the set, about what people are wearing? Go online, right? Go to their Facebook page, go to their website, and now we get feedback on those brands immediately, and we know what to do with them moving forward. So, and the same thing here, the same thing with your brands. So it's that path back and what we do with that information that allows us to continuously improve the brand. Always been shared, but now we're listening better.
Well, I think technology is also has enabled speed. You know, the more that we've moved into, I hate to use the word digital too much because then it can start siloing things out, but it has enabled speed. And you just think about when you started work and you first I had a typewriter, and then it became a computer, and then we had email, and you think about the speed of our lives and the basic communication that's happening on a daily basis. You're hearing from your customers a lot faster. It was a mail-in campaign. Then you had a call center. Now you have people who are managing your social, platforms. That is something that is at the speed of light now, and the expectation now with your customer is that you're going to respond very quickly. They would wait for you to respond if they sent you a letter. They didn't really expect anything back. Right. This expectation right now is if it's not responded to immediately, that you're ignoring them. Mm-hmm. If the product isn't right immediately, then the product's failed. It's a very different world we're living in versus, I think, as someone who grew up in the 80s, I'm a little bit more accepting of, it'll get there. You don't have that expectation out of the box. If you're dealing with a younger consumer, they want it to be right immediately, and that's what their expectation is.
Our CEO, Paul Pullman, reminds us regularly that it took 17 days to bring down a 40-year dictatorship in Egypt. Right. You think about fleeting power, right? You think about how quickly today you can be irrelevant tomorrow, or how a few strong voices enabled by technology, which wasn't there tomorrow, can completely and transform who you are as a brand. Then you're not paying attention.
So your competitor comes along and beats the crap out of you. How do you respond?
I mean, again, if you're principled and you are clear on your point of difference and who you are as a brand, what I love is the most gratifying thing for us, I think, as marketers is what we see a lot of times on brands like Axe and Dove. The community themselves responds. Right? So somebody does something great from one of our competitors, the constituency, our women would, on our Facebook page or whatever, would respond and say, yeah, that's good, but that's not Dove, and here are the 10 reasons why Dove is better.
Okay.
And when you have that kind of love and affinity, which is something we treasure and do not take for granted for a second, then I think you've captured the magic of branding. And I'd like to be able to say we have it on all of our brands. I think we have it on our great ones, and our good ones are getting there.
Jen, how do you respond? Especially you're coming up to your most important selling season, the holidays, where day in and day out, you're fighting everybody off in order to capture the consumer for those purchases. And so you're under the gun every single day. How do you capture that consumer loyalty and drive them through that entire selling season?
Well, fourth quarter for us is obviously at Macy's is a unique time in that it represents such extraordinary sales volume, but also years ago, before I think even the 3 C's and 4 P's had been identified, the idea of the magic of the holidays and what Macy's could do to celebrate New York, to give back to what was at the time a local event has now become a national event, and really establishing us as an entertainment brand as well as a retailing brand in the Thanksgiving Day Parade. So that for us is something that as we've matured as brand builders, as our footprint has expanded nationally, we really go into fourth quarter thinking about how that particular asset, I hate calling it an asset because it's obviously so much more than that, but how that for us opens up the holiday season, and then how we respect the fact that consumers are coming into our store both because they expect to have to get their shopping done and to serve a purpose that's very practical, but also to have something spectacular happen. And so when we look at the landscape of other retailers, that's the experience that we know that we own and we can really heighten. And whether it's nostalgia for some people or a new experience for others, it's for us is the thing that's truly differentiating.
Gotcha. Let's talk about creativity and innovation. They themselves can start to build brand loyalty. How is it these days? How do we build creativity into the system? Is this something which just has become increasingly organic? Is this part of our core business system to provide that brand differentiation? Does it really exist these days?
I think the challenge around creativity is not teasing out great creative ideas. I think if you sit still long enough in a room full of smart people, there are plenty of amazing ideas that emerge. I think the real skill is in figuring out which ones to act upon and how to put them in motion and how to evaluate their worth. To me, that ends up being the more unusual skill is implementation and measurement.
Is media, Steve, the new creative?
It's always been the creative. It's not the new creative.
The medium is the message.
But I agree with what you said with one addition. Did I do that already? I did that to you already?
That's all right.
Okay. So
2.0.
He's 2.0.
See, ideas, they're easy. It's how you implement them.
That's right. It's also how they fit together, okay? I mean, I have never walked into a client and said, here's the mix, here's the communications mix, and have somebody say, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. What they really want to know is, how'd you know that was enough? How'd you know that TV or that print or what you're doing online or what you're doing here is enough? So it's almost like a puzzle for us, right? And if you wanted to think about it, one of the ways that we think about it, is, again, I talked about it before, it is precise targeting, right? So one of our agencies is called Targetcast for a reason, right? So it is precise targeting in the land of fragmentation and clutter, right? That is key. The other thing that is key is understanding how to take an environment that has everything you ever needed and have it all work together with the push and what we talked about a minute ago, listening, right, and the pull, right, because we want to get that back from consumers. So it's building that total communications platform off the brand, off what you guys made this brand stand for, that made it relevant and made it, and made it smart, efficient, and targeted. That's the important thing.
My question is, do you think, I don't believe that one piece of creative is going to solve every problem. And I think that it is about how you create a volume of messages that you can segment and sequence, and you can send them out. When we are contextually relevant, when we really, really look at who the consumer is, and we look at the insights and their passions, and we can align more to that, you watch the work really connect. The moment that it starts showing a reflection of somebody, of their own life, is the moment you've said to somebody, to a customer, look, I know you. You're part of the family. And I do think that, there is a core brand, and the core, 30s are so important, but it is also how you round out and create a more vibrant landscape with all these other pieces of content that you segment out. The other thing is, I also think that, right now we've done a great job of creating relationships with consumers, and then we break up with them. The flight's over, I'm done with you, it's been nice. It's like text message breakup. And it is about creating more of a long lead, 365 days, one-to-one conversation, where it doesn't always have to be about the brand, but it's about how you understand their life and how you can bring them entertainment and content across all of their devices, because we've got to follow them wherever they are, to connect with them when they need you and when they want to lean in.
Hey, let's open this up to the audience. Do we have any questions out there?
Yeah,
for
I've
our
actually got
esteemed
some that
panel?
have come in by
You got
text.
some?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
First one is, why do you think the, quote, new brands of the past decade are finding it harder to be successful?
New brands of the last decade that are finding it hard to be successful, like Facebook,
Google's
like that
struggling.
Google thing. Yeah,
It's not my question.
Yeah, no. I know. I'm being a jerk to make a point. It gets back to the great enabler, right? The internet is the great democratizer. I think how established companies with long-standing brands with decades or hundreds of years of history are responding is a question in our industry. It also opens up and gives birth to all these new brands, which are going to fundamentally alter the way human beings live their lives, right? Fuel Band, right? Is this going to make me healthier? Is this going to make me walk more, monitor my calories? Hopefully, right? And God bless them if it does. So.
Yeah. Listen, from a retail standpoint, a new-ish brand that I'll admit wasn't entirely on our radar is Amazon. And here we are as retailers in 2012, and Amazon is what we talk about all day long. We talk about it in the context of showrooming. I don't know that they're new per se, but the concept that they brought to market 12 years ago, 15 years ago was new. And I think it took a lot of retailers some time to be really cognizant of what kind of value proposition they were offering customers and how radically it changes the way people shop.
Okay, we have a lot of questions, actually.
Chuck,
Thank you.
Chuck, can I slip in one live question?
Of course.
So, Jennifer, you have an interesting perspective. You have to do the branding for Macy's, but then you're also affected by the extraordinary amount of brands that are sold through your store. So my question is perhaps to you and to, product manufacturers like Dove that are, what do you guys do together in this complicated digital age to take advantage of one another's brands, to not be detrimentally affected by branding across the landscape? How do you manage that from Macy's perspective?
I think there are two components that have become increasingly potent for us. One has been this notion of personalization and listening to the customer, observing her behavior, and delivering her the content that's most relevant to her. Whether it's, we're doing some testing in print, certainly it's much easier now in digital to offer her the assortment of brands or product categories that are more relevant. So that's been enormously helpful. And then we're very fortunate to have tremendous exclusive partnerships with a number of brands. Tommy Hilfiger is a great example. We're the only department store that carries Tommy Hilfiger in the US. That relationship for us and working side by side with them, both from a product assortment standpoint, private brands are a huge part of our portfolio in terms of what we're selling that's exclusive. We're building that brand, the brands in that portfolio, or a brand like Tommy Hilfiger or Rachel Roy, our partnership with Ralph Lauren. Those are the pillars that support our business, and I think it ends up being kind of a back-of-house leadership driven relationship.
Is there digital content out there right now? Are you guys co-producing ads together and having those find their way into the digital landscape?
With many of those brands, absolutely. We meet with any of the brands, most of the brands that are within our store on a regular basis and figure out how digital marketing, whether it's targeted or retargeted advertising, makes sense for certain brands. Ralph Lauren's a great example. Certainly, their brand is built on a very clear vision for how they want to communicate, but we do that in partnership. We're their primary retail partner in the U.S., and we build together. They are going to do well if we do well, and vice versa.
Great. Can you cite an example of that type of creative that's out there? I haven't seen any of it. Like what's happening on the internet in terms of a co-branded ad like that?
So, I mean, something that's live right now, we built out a social activation with Carter's, soliciting our Facebook fans' baby pictures wearing Carter's and with an enter to win. It's a very simple, straightforward idea that many have done, but we happen to do it in partnership with Carter's, and it's been incredibly successful for us.
Okay, another audience question. Does the rise of digital marketing force a shift from emotional to rational branding?
I don't think so. I mean, it depends on how you're experiencing it. Yeah. I think that everything can come from an emotional standpoint as long as you know your customer really well, and you also understand the insights and the passion points to connect with them. I don't think it has to be very cut and dry.
I think there's, at least for us, there's storytelling in finding a great deal on a pair of shoes. We get as many emotional reactions to finding that amazing deal as we do to posting a baby picture for Carter's. And I think the shoppers who are in our store, and I would imagine Dove, you get people who appreciate the value, you have people who appreciate the story that you're telling. I think it's the fine line.
I've got another Macy's question while you're there. This is also from the
You're
audience.
popular.
I've got one coming your way too. Didn't Chicago consumers rather strongly tell Macy's not to change the name of Marshall Fields? Were they right?
Good question. So yes, there was an impassioned reaction. This is where, had we had more social media at the time, we would have been able to understand, and in the listening, but at the time that this happened, which was in 2006, there was an impassioned plea from a handful of Chicagoans not to change the name. We had, given the size of the database that we inherited from Marshall Fields, we had the ability to listen and understand whether these were customers of Marshall Fields or whether they were fans of Marshall Fields who were complaining. And it turned out that for the most part, the people who were complaining the loudest hadn't been shopping in the store. So we moved boldly forward, and now our business in Chicago is much healthier than it was. So the Chicagoans who are shopping with us are seeing assortments that are more reflective of how they wanted to shop.
Okay, last quick question, then we have to wrap. Unilever or P&G, who is better at connecting with and activating their consumers, and why?
That's easy.
Is that for me? Because
Come on, come on.
it's an obvious one.
Come
Did
on.
did it come from P&G's agency at the end here? Look,
You have to end on a great note here.
We do a damn good job.
I'm glad they're there, right? And truthfully, at the end of the day, the better your competitors, if you win, I tell my team all the time, you are the Yankees of your industry. You work for the preeminent company in the preeminent league against preeminent competitors in your chosen profession. The analogy is professional sports and professional athletes. And if you win at this level, if you gain share and you win affinity and win engagement, you are the best in the world. So whether it's Unilever, Procter, L'Oreal, there are a few others in the top flight of consumer products that we would compete with. I'm glad they're there. And I'm glad, I think everybody does great work. In pockets and on balance, we all do. Very political answer, wasn't it?
Wrapping up? I guess we're wrapping it up. So thanks very much to our great panel for some terrific insights.